Right, Professor Rosa, it's time for us to do some stuff about crime and punishment. We're mainly going to talk about capital punishment in this. Do you agree with capital punishment? Yeah, you do agree with capital punishment. You believe in the death of anyone who doesn't give you biscuit. Are you trying to get on the table? You can't get on the table, right? Now you're desperate for your biscuit. You're not allowed on the table, Professor. Okay, let's talk about laws first of all. Law is an instruction that applies to all people in a nation. Okay, religions will have laws and religions will have laws, and these laws are meant to apply to everyone equally most of the time. Those laws can have specific people who are exempt from them, but that is generally what a law is. Most laws historically have a religious basis. So in this country, if you look at our most severe laws, murder laws, that is based around religious law as well. The religious law states that we cannot kill, and so therefore law is made that we cannot kill. Though that is not always the case. So religious law versus moral law. You might be asked something along this line, like a time when it's all right for a religious person to break the law, or a time when the law of the land does not fit in with the law of the religion. So the 10 Commandments lead to sin. These are our religious laws, okay? The moral ones would be murder, stealing, lying. And these are against the 10 Commandments, and they are against... Right. Professor Rosa, right, what are you doing? Stop trying to hold my hand. It's very nice of you. I'll hold your hand while I talk then, if you really want to hold hands. Right. Murder, stealing, lying. These are against the 10 Commandments, but they're also against the law. So it's the religious law and the moral law at the same time. That's great. So you can say, oh, sometimes the law of the religion and the law of the nation are the same. For example, with murder, stealing and lying. However, some laws are not religious, okay? Any driving law, obviously, because it's based around cars, it didn't exist when the religion was formed. Any law about gay marriage, the legalisation of gay marriage, is, of course, against the religion. And there are some things that are in the 10 Commandments that are considered a sin, but are not against the law at all. In fact, the main one would be adultery. Adultery is obviously the sin where we sleep with someone who is not our husband and wife. But that's not illegal in this country. It's illegal in some countries. Saudi Arabia, Iran, that is still illegal. In Iran, it's still punishable with death, adultery. But in this country, it is not punishable with death. In this country, it is not against the law at all. You might say it's immoral, you might say it's wrong, but it's not illegal. And that's where something being wrong and being legal are different. It is wrong to kill and it's illegal to kill. But there are certain things that it's wrong to do. You would say that I'm a bad person, but it's not illegal. I can watch someone die and not do anything about it. That is wrong, but it's not illegal. I don't have a legal responsibility to save a life. So if I see someone fall over in the street and crack their head, I have no legal responsibility to help them at all as a human. As a teacher in a classroom, it's different, but my legal responsibility is not the same as my moral responsibility. A bad person doesn't always break the law. They can just be a bad person. Is it ever right to break the law? Yes, the needs of your family. If the needs of your family or the moral needs outweigh the moral cost of breaking the law, for example, stealing a loaf of bread to feed a starving child, most people would argue that that is a morally good thing to do. If there's no other option, not as your first option, if it was a last resort and there was no other option. If we say killing someone is against the law, well, then we wouldn't say self-defense should be against the law, because that is not immoral. Sometimes it is right to break that law. If the law itself is immoral, if you believe the law is wrong, the law is a bad thing, then you might believe it's okay to break that law. So if the law stated that you could not do a certain thing that you agreed with, say the smoking of marijuana, and you were like, no, this is a moral freedom that I deserve, I'm going to break this law on purpose because I believe every person should have the right to smoke marijuana, then you could say, I'm breaking this law for a moral purpose. Or if you're going on a violent protest to try and change the law, you're like, no, you said we couldn't protest, but we are going to protest. That is a time when it's right to break the law. Or to express your faith, if the law is against your religion. For example, if they're like going, we've banned people going to church, you might go, no, I'm willing to break that law in order to do what I think is right. But no, we shouldn't ever break the law. We should respect the law. The law is there to protect us. The religious books teach us to respect the law. It is there for our benefit. Laws are there to keep the whole of society safe. And the laws often come from religion, so if you're religious, you'd want to follow those laws. Now, what type of crime are we talking about? Well, there's 3 types categorised in the spec. Against the person, these are crimes which are directly done against a human being. Murder, hate crimes, assaults, rapes, all of those come as crimes against a person. So if you need a crime against a person, choose one of those ones. You would be expected probably to talk about why it's a bad thing. I'd expect you to be able to do that on your own without me having to explain it. Crimes against property. Arson, robbery. Though robbery is you're stealing a person's objects, you are depriving them of their property. So the crime is considered against the property. Arson, robbery. That's sort of stealing the property, not sort of mugging them. That would be considered a crime against the person and against the property. And crimes against the state in this sense is the nation. So how do we do a crime against a nation? Well, terrorism, we blow up an important building. Yes, it could be a crime against a person because we're killing people in that building, but it's a crime against a state because your attack is trying to bring down the government. Or selling secrets. I work for the government. I know the workings of a nuclear reactor. Another government, the Russian government, asked me for those secrets and I sell them to them. That is a crime against the state. I'm endangering many, many lives with that. You'd probably want to be able to argue which one of these you consider most important. So crimes against the person is important because it can lead to murder and we only have one life and we need to protect that the most. Sanctity of life, stuff like that. Crimes against a state, that protects the whole nation. That means the whole country is protected. So if we have crimes against a state, then everyone is in danger. Just choose which one you would be able to argue. It would be an outside the box 12-mark question, but I could see it happening and we should be prepared for all eventualities. What reasons are there for crime? Well, the spec lists these ones. Your upbringing, how you're brought up might lead you to committing crimes. Mental illness, you might not be able to control yourself so you commit crimes. Poverty, you are living in a poor area so you are not able to afford things so you commit crime to do this. Addiction, you are addicted to something that is illegal or your addiction leads you to breaking the law in order to gain more of this illegal stuff. So you're addicted to heroin, taking the heroin is illegal, you also need money, you haven't got a job so you steal to get the money for the heroin. Greed, you just want more and more and more so you steal, so you rob a bank, so you sell drugs because you just want to have the most money. El Chapo and stuff like that. And opposition to existing laws. You believe the law is wrong, so you're going to purposely break it in order to prove a point, or you're going to go on a march or like a riot or a protest to try and change the law. We're going to, like the climate change people recently, when they were gluing themselves to like people's fences and to trains and stuff like that, a lot of that was illegal activity, but they're in opposition to existing laws about climate change. They're like, right, we're going to break the law to change the law. We need you to understand how much we're willing to do this. Now, evil, I'd expect you, we did this in the first exam, I expect this to be relatively easy. Some crimes are considered evil, so murder and stuff like that. Now, maybe a person, I expect you to know all the devil stuff, and I expect you to know about Adam and Eve and free will, but just in case, if people can be born evil, then maybe that is why they commit crime. You can talk about people being naturally evil. However, where does that leave free will if they're naturally evil? If they were born evil, have they got the free will to choose what they want? Some people believe no one is born evil, and therefore we all have the free will to make those decisions. It's our upbringing that causes crime, it's poverty. However, maybe some people are born evil. That could be a nice discussion to have in a 12-mark question. And free will and punishment. Free will is a reason we can be punished and a reason we can commit evil. If I'm doing an action through my own free will, it is my responsibility what that action is, and I deserve the consequences. If we have no free will, then is any crime or sin our fault truly? We will be punished for it if we do not have free will. Could be an interesting discussion for a 12-mark question. As it came up in the first exam, I'm not expecting an evil question, but the exam board could really throw anything at you. I'd like it to. That's a relatively easy sort of topic because we've done it in that first exam already. Aims of punishment. Right, these words I really want you to try and learn and be really aware of. Aims of punishment. Deterrence. Stop others committing crimes in the first place. So I do a punishment on someone, like I cut their head off, so everyone else knows this is what happens if you commit this crime. So you are scared of doing the crime. It should make society more peaceful as everyone else is less likely to commit crime. Retribution. You give a punishment that fits the crime. It fits the crime. So someone had gone around... that's not a bad example. Someone had killed, and so you kill them. Okay, eye for an eye is very literal. Retribution. This is why we're doing it. You kidnap someone, so we're going to put you in prison for the same length of time. So you are put behind bars. Oh, you destroyed like these fences, so your punishment is going to be you have to reinstall the fences through community service. You did graffiti, so you're going to clean graffiti off. Retribution. Your punishment fits the crime. Prison is meant to be retribution. You go, right, you did this amount of bad stuff, so we're going to give you what we consider the retribution amount of time in prison. that deserves 5 years. You could argue whether that is true or not in a nice 12-mark question. Reformation, you change the behaviour back towards right. You want society to be a better place. You want people to be forgiven, so you try and reform them. You do reformation, hoping that they will be a better person in the future and they will be able to be a part of society and make the world a better place. This is an idea of forgiveness. The idea of people not reoffending. If your punishment has been successful, they will not sin again. They will not offend again. They will not break the law again. Protection. Keep other people safe. There are some criminals out there who are so dangerous that we must put them away for a long period of time to keep everyone else safe. Or we must do a punishment that keeps other people safe. For example, a paedophile is often given, is always put on the sex offenders register. That is part of their punishment in order to keep everyone else safe. Murderers, particularly a serial killer, for example, like the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, is put in prison forever. There is no chance of reformation. He is put in prison forever for everyone else's protection. Some people would argue that's retribution as well, because he's put in prison forever because he took so many lives, then his whole life should be taken in the sense that he's in prison, not literally in this sense. And it's a deterrent. Anyone else thinking of doing the same thing should think, oh, I won't do that. I don't want to be in prison forever like Peter Sutcliffe. Though you might argue that someone who's willing to murder might not be so scared of the consequences of going to prison if they're that psychotic in the first place. Where do Christians fall in these types of punishment? Well, mostly they agree with them. Okay, they're like, yeah, these aims of punishment make sense. For deterrence, they're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. We think deterrent punishments are making sense. It makes the world more law-abiding and into safety. Though it's not their favourite. Their favourite will probably be retribution and reformation. So retribution from the Bible, you've got eye for an eye. Why do Christians like retribution? Eye for an eye. There are certain sins in the Bible that are clearly set out. You don't want people to break them. And if they do break them, they deserve to have that thing done to them. If they've killed, they deserve to die. That is what some Christians believe. However, some Christians are far more into reformation, reforming them, forgiveness. That's their like. How many times shall I forgive my brother? 7 times and 77 times after that. Jesus is like, we must keep forgiving people, giving them extra chances. Well, therefore, reformation must be our most important reason for punishment, our most important aim in punishment. Because we're trying to forgive them, we're trying to make them better people. Protection, save others. If we put a murderer away, is that not us protecting the sanctity of life? We put someone away forever to try and protect the rest of society and protect their sanctity of life. They have killed, so we must protect their sanctity of life. Ugh. Okay, types of punishment. Types of punishment is not an aim of punishment. If it says types of punishment, it's how we punish people. Please try not to get those confused in the exam. Read it carefully. Aims of punishment is what you want to achieve through that punishment. Types of punishment is how you're going to do that. So your aim of punishment is reformation. Your type of punishment is either prison, community service, corporal punishment, or capital punishment, which I'll deal with in its whole own page. So types of punishment, prison. Perhaps the easiest to talk about, the most common in this country that we talk about by miles. Prison is obviously locking someone in a custodial, in custody for a prolonged period of time where they've got their personal freedoms of movement taken away from them. Okay, it is where they are locked in a building where they have their personal freedoms of movement and their freedoms of action taken away from them. Is this a good thing? Yes. And then we can link it to the aims of punishment. Yes, it protects people. Okay, certain criminals can be put away and it can protect people. They're protecting the other's sanctity of life. It's a deterrence because we can put them in prison and it should deter other criminals from doing the same. And it can lead to reformation. We put them in prison and we reform them by putting them in education programs, and then we can show them forgiveness by releasing them from prison so they can try and have another chance. We can give them 7 times and 77 times trips to prison so they can see if they can finally find forgiveness. God would keep forgiving us, so we must keep forgiving them. However, what is bad about prisons? Well, most prisoners reoffend, unfortunately. If you look at the statistics, most prisoners do go on to commit more crimes. So the reformation levels in prison are very, very poor. The posh word they use, and I don't think they use in the exam, but it's just a nice word to hear, recidivism. The recidivism levels in this country are relatively high. Prisoners often do break the law again. And you're putting bad people in with bad people. You're putting all the criminals in one place. So surely that's going to lead to more people being involved in crime if you're doing this. You could also argue that prisons are not a good place to reform people, as they are not conducive to education, that prisons aren't harsh enough and therefore aren't a good enough deterrence. So they're not actually doing the job they're meant to. You can argue nicely about prisons either side. I expect you to be able to do that relatively well. Community service. This is projects done within the community that benefit the community through the work of prisoners. For example, litter picking or working in a charity organisation. What's the aim of this punishment? Well, the main two is going to be reformation and retribution. So the graffiti artist has to go and clean up graffiti, okay? Reformation, the person who was violent towards animals has to go and work in an animal charity and hopefully understands what they've done and stops being angry towards animals and starts treating them with respect. That is the aim. Right? You reform them, you teach them better. So Christians like these? Yes, to a certain degree. Obviously, Reformation talks about forgiveness. You're helping the community. You're making the world a better place. Retribution, you could argue for minor crimes. It can be an eye for an eye. So if they've done something, this makes sense. The graffiti artist cleaning up graffiti is an eye for an eye. Eye for an eye doesn't need to be the most severe crimes. It can be minor things. However, what's wrong with community service? Well, you could argue it's too soft from a deterrence point of view. It's not scary enough, and it's going to lead to people committing more crimes and making more sins. That could be an issue with it. And there's not enough projects. There are not enough projects out there for people to do, and therefore they're not related to crime. It's not retribution. Most of the time, often it can be something unrelated to crime you committed. So you were drunk and fighting in public, and you end up picking litter. How is that related to the crime that you committed? It's not an eye for an eye. It's just an unrelated punishment. So maybe this does not work. Corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is a physical punishment. The idea of being hurt or attacked in some way because of your crime. This can be being whipped in certain countries. It can be having your hand cut off in certain countries. It is illegal in the United Kingdom to use corporal punishment. It is considered barbaric. Why is corporal punishment a good thing? Well, it's a deterrent. It should, if it's a public corporal punishment where it's seen, it should stop people committing that crime in the future, other people committing it, because they'll be like, I don't want that to happen to me. Saudi Arabia, the classic is having a thief having their hand cut off, which is in the Quran. It says in the Quran, a thief, male or female, should lose their hand. A thief, male or female, should lose their hand. Well, therefore, we can see it as a deterrent. Other people would see that hand has been missing, and they would go, well, I don't want to lose a hand. I'm not going to steal. Retribution, eye for an eye. They've hurt someone, they should be hurt. Easy peasy. So corporal punishment is deterrent and retribution, whereas community service is obviously reformation and retribution. Turn the other cheek. Hang on. Oh, sorry, this is why corporal punishment isn't good. Hang on, what we meant to turn the other cheek? Jesus said, I tell you, not an eye for an eye, but turn the other cheek. He's literally talking about an eye for an eye and says, I don't like eye for an eye. Jesus is against eye for an eye. He says, turn the other cheek. And we're barbaric. Are we taught not to hurt people? If we're taught not to hurt people, how do we ourselves hurt people? Isn't that us committing the same sin that we are criticising? And that takes us on to capital punishment, which has similar arguments in favour or against as corporal punishment. Very similar arguments. So, let's get the law sorted first. The death penalty. In this country, capital punishment just means death penalty, okay? Executions, hangings, electric chair, lethal injection. They're the big ones to talk about in terms of the methods, because they're the most common methods used. It was last used in this country in 1964, and it was officially banned in 1965 in Britain, apart from Northern Ireland, which was 1973. But if you say 1965, that's in the textbook. I think you're going to get the mark for it. It happens in the USA, Saudi Arabia, and China, okay? Those three countries execute a lot of people between them. China, the most, but also it does have the biggest population, but it actually executes on a far greater level than the others. We just don't talk about very much. Of Western countries that are similar to England in the style of culture, the USA is the one that has it. No European Union country has the death penalty anymore. Very few European countries use executions at all. It's very uncommon in Europe nowadays. Right, let's think about why we should have the death penalty from a different loads of views. It's a deterrent. It should scare people. Now, you can talk about how it doesn't seem to, because in certain countries they have the death penalty, like America, they have the death penalty, and their murder rate is much higher than in England, so surely it isn't working over there. But you should say that's the aim of it, to scare people into obeying the law. If we introduce a death penalty, maybe it would cause murders to go down. That's the logic of it. Whether that logic makes sense, you could argue, but it's a nice point to make. Protection. Certain people are so dangerous that they cannot be trusted to live anymore. Your example could be Ted Bundy, who I've been teaching now since last year, and then since then they've done a Netflix thing about him and a film about him, so he's perfect. You should know more about him than ever. Ted Bundy escaped from prison while waiting for his trial and murdered more people. Clearly, his ability to escape from prison meant that he could not be trusted to live in prison. He was too dangerous. So, in that sense, the only thing to keep the public safe was to execute him in some ways. That could be your argument. Protection, Ted Bundy. Bundy, Ted Bundy. Retribution, an eye for an eye. That person has caused you pain. You should cause that person pain. They have killed, so they deserve to die. An eye for an eye. Okay. Some people are beyond reform. That's what we talked about with Ted Bundy. So you could say Ted Bundy does not deserve forgiveness for what he has done. You could say that we should let God judge them. So we are taking their life on earth. We should let God judge them, and shows that some crimes cannot be forgiven, like those murders. However, why should we be against it? Well, let's think logically. First of all, two wrongs don't make a right. Really simple, non-religious view. What about innocent people wrongly convicted? Doesn't that make the executioner a murderer in that sense, if they execute an innocent person? But thou shalt not kill. Only God should take life, sanctity of life. We have been told already that God is the only one who can take life, and therefore God is the only one who gave life, so God's the only one who can take life away. Why would we take that out of God's hands? Surely we should allow God to have that decision still. And Jesus says, when he stops an execution, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. This woman's about to be executed, and Jesus rocks up and stops it and goes, no, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Basically saying, are any of you perfect? If any of you have not sinned, then you can execute this woman. And the crowd walk away, and Jesus is basically like, yeah, that's what I thought. Basically, none of you are perfect, so we can't be executing people. Only God is perfect enough to take a life. None of us are. Right, and as a final thing, I've drawn a lovely horse. There's Peter the horse. Oh, that's his back legs. And there's Peter the horse.